All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started now. Welcome to everybody. My name is Alex Plotkin, and I am a Senior Business Advisor here at the Collins Small Business Development Center. Um, Welcome to our presentation this morning. We are going to be getting started here in just a minute. I want to take a second to thank you for joining us and remind you that we do want this to be an interactive presentation. So feel free to type your questions in the chat box, and John will be getting to those as it comes up in the presentation or at the end if necessary. Let me introduce now our speaker. John Franke is the owner of Franke Culinary Consulting. They focus on menu and operational development for new and existing brands in the restaurant space. John has had a variety of experiences working for places such as Harvey Hotels, Neiman Marcus, Sullivan Steakhouse. If you're in Dallas, you're familiar with some of the names. He's worked with the Papados and Papacitos and Papa's Seafood House, as well as some other brands with Front Burner and a couple of other companies that he's going to get to in here in just a second. So the point is, John's got a lot of experience, so hopefully we can all benefit from it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John, let you get started.
Okay, well, thank you, Alex. Thank you all for participating and being here today and taking time out of your busy schedules. I know it's been a crazy last 9 months, and it seems the craziness seems to continue. So I'm going to just jump right in here, and let's see. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. You should be able to see it. So just to piggyback on what Alex said, I've had a myriad of experience in the restaurant business. Mostly focusing on the culinary portion of things. In the back of the house. You in Collin County certainly would have probably heard of or seen here and there when you're out and about. So just to kind of throw those out there, these are brands that while with Front Burner for 11 years, I did all the menu development along with other chefs in some cases. And definitely oversaw the culinary programs, the culinary teams, and did everything and anything that was culinary in all these different brands. So if you've eaten food in any of these places, chances are I either helped create it or was part of the process. So anyway, so just help to give you an idea of what I've done over the last couple of years. I've done consulting and mainly worked in two buckets. One is new brand, new menu, or new menu development for a new upcoming brand. So a client comes to me and says, hey, I've got this idea and I'd like to open it in whatever location. And we start with a blank piece of paper. And by the end of it, after about 60 days, we'll have a full menu, recipes, procedures, order guides, prep list, connecting them with all the vendors, no matter what city they're in, and giving them all the SKUs and those sort of things. So it's sort of a one-stop shop. The other bucket that I mainly play in is going into brands that exist and helping enhance those brands and helping them, quote unquote, fix things that they may feel are a problem. So it could be their food, their execution, their flavor profiles, could be their operations, could be the equipment layout, whatever it is that they feel they might be missing. And then all as well that I feel like could be better, and then help them, increase their sales, increase their execution, decrease their negative comments. And then I'm working with different companies looking for new menu ideation. I may simply just go in and somebody says, hey, I just need 5 new menu items. And I feel like everything else is okay, but I just really need some creative powerhouse because I might only have kitchen managers or something like that. And so people will turn to me for that. What we're hoping, let me see how this works here. I'm not a very good, here we go. PowerPoint guy. I think that's what I need to do. Okay, so today's goals by the end of this time together, definitely want you to walk away from this being mindful and determined of how to produce a new strategy and honestly a new mindset. So with the ultimate goal of beating last year's sales and beating out your competition. The real key of that is looking at things through a different lens. And that's something that I'm going to repeat over and over again, is just how do you walk into your business and look at it from a different perspective. You're there every single day. You're living in the trenches. You're eating the same food. You're using the same bathroom. You're seeing the same staff, and you can become very stagnant and not see things through that new lens. And so it's very important that if you're going to beat out that competition, if you're going to do something different and be differentiated from other restaurants in your segment, in your category, and in your area, you need to really think through things through a different lens. You'll hopefully by the end of this have a new appreciation for doing things in a different way. And you'll be encouraged that there's a clear path to broader success. And, we hope to send you on your way with an action plan for updating your menu, your food offerings, and your brand identity. And the brand identity is the kind of the big one that we're going to talk about. And so that's what we hope. On this slide, a lot of questions that I think are very important to ask. Presumably you want to do something different and you want to learn little tidbits. If you pick up just 10% of what I say, hopefully you'll get something out of it. But ultimately what you need to do is you need to make a real purposeful decision to change. I don't have any magical button that I could push to make your sales go up by 20 or 30%. I don't have a magical button to get rid of COVID. So the question is for your brand, like I said, through a different lens. The very, very first question that you need to ask yourself is what is the core identity of your restaurant? Another way to say this would be, what is your DNA? Who are you? Who is that particular restaurant? Think of it as an actor, or think of it as a car, or think of it as a song. Like, what is the definition that you could start at? What is the core identity? Things that are on your menu. Why are they on your menu? Why do servers wear the particular uniforms that they wear? Or why do the cooks or the chefs wear a particular hat that they wear? Everything should be tied into an identity. You as a person have an identity. You have a hair color and an eye color, and you have, you're tall, short, big, little. Those are part of your DNA. Those are part of your core identity. Obviously, you have personality things that you are also part of that. Ways that you look at the world are part of that. Things can be changed. And manipulate. You've identified that, and we'll go through a couple slides that'll help sort of articulate this for you. But once you've identified that, then a lot of other questions can be answered. And you can be set on your way to sort of, you can't be different. Accomplishments. That's one way to look at it. Another question to ask yourself is who are you and who are you targeting? You need to have a bullseye, and obviously if your bullseye is millennials, that doesn't mean that you're going to turn away anybody that's over 45. That just means that you have a bullseye, and then there's a lot of periphery of folks that will come in. But ultimately, and I'll repeat this again later, that you just can't be all things to all people, and so you need to really have a very, very, with the flexibility to reach out to others. If you're targeting in a restaurant, Hooters, Twin Peaks, all these other different ones, they're targeting men, but at the same time, there are items on the menu that are for females. So, that's just an example there. But define who you are and who are you targeting. And if you can't do that, then it's going to be hard. Be really specific about it. If you do know your target, are you hitting your target, and are you staying true to brand? So once you've identified who your brand is, you identified your identity, you know your target, now then you ask yourself, well, let me dig a little deeper. Am I really hitting my target? Am I really reaching out to the right people? So for example, if your target is, again, millennials, what's your marketing message and where are you marketing? Where are you putting your restaurant out there? Millennials probably aren't going to be the people that like really connect to a flyer hung on their doorknob. They're going to be people that you reach out through Facebook and various other social media platforms. So keep that in mind as well. Also ask yourself, which is a pretty easy question to answer, what's working and what isn't working? If it's not working, then it's time to change it. There's a lot of times where I talk to people and they say, well, I know it's not really working, but it's what we've always done. And that's a very, very dangerous trap to get yourself into. If you're going to try to be better and you're going to try to increase your sales, which is the ultimate goal for all business people, all business owners, and increase not just increase sales, increase profits, you need to decide what's working and what isn't. What is the bottom 10% of your menu that doesn't sell? If it doesn't sell, get rid of it. And again, I've heard, well, but, so-and-so Nancy Smith comes in every Friday morning and orders that. Well, you know what? Maybe you can introduce Nancy Smith to something else, because if she's the only one that's ordering it, it's probably not something you want to keep on your menu. And then to the reverse of that, you want to ask yourself, what are your non-negotiables on the menu and what's non-negotiable in your service? Somebody like me as a consultant will be hired to come in to identify areas of concern, areas that need to be fixed, areas that, that need to be bettered. And so I may say, well, I don't think that menu item belongs. And you could say as a client, no, that's a non-negotiable. That one stays. And then there's a reason why it should stay. Maybe it's a high selling item. Maybe it's a high margin item. Maybe it's an item that, it defines who you are. And that could be. So you just need to decide what can go, what has to stay, and then work within those parameters. And that's kind of to the next point. What items can I never live without? And what items can I kill if I had to today? When you talk about killing a menu item, you want to look at things that are low margin, things that don't sell very well, things that are high food costs, things that require too many SKUs and too many different pieces of the specific things, the protein, the vegetable, the sauce, the whatever the ingredients are, those things are also used on other menu items, then it's probably not a big deal to keep it. If you have a menu item that doesn't sell very well, it kind of drives your food costs up when it does sell, and it uses 5 SKUs that are nothing else, that's probably an item that you really want to take a look at. Getting beyond the food items themselves, looking at the menu. Obviously, so many people right now are in digital menus versus paper. If paper ever comes back, ask yourself how it's laid out. The very important thing right now that I have noticed and I have seen is people that weren't poised for this change of COVID, and they went into a QSR code and into the menu. Well, the menu leads you to their website, and typically on the website there might be a PDF or that you have to open, and it's not always conducive on a phone. So here you are sitting there as a consumer, and you're trying to maneuver around the screen to figure out what you want to buy. There is a dramatic difference between holding a piece of paper and being able to let your eyes scan all over it versus on a phone, which is very small. So if you are digital, which most of you I'm sure are, making sure that you're looking at that of how's the layout, how does it feel, how does it work? And again, looking at it from a different lens, looking at it from a different perspective. Is what you used to do the right way, or is it just the way that it was done? And now with COVID, it has flipped everything on upside down. And so it's just an opportunity to be flexible and be different and to do something that is maybe a little bit outside the box. So just think about how your items, how it feels as a consumer. Ask your friends and your family to come in and sit down at the table. And it's really difficult to find all the drinks and find all the different appetizers and to bounce around. But anyway, the layout of the menu is important. So if we ever do get back to paper, where things are placed on the menu. You may have something that's a low selling item, and you may realize that it's just the description, or it's the price, or it's the placement on the menu. Right now, with your digital menus, you may find that your PMix has completely been skewed, because now it's just easier to just order the chicken because I can't read all the words on everything else and I don't want to deal with it. And so I'm just going to stick with that. Or I come into a restaurant that I already know kind of what I used to order, so I really don't want to go through the drama of opening up my phone. So these are things to think about of how can you move things around? How can you increase the font or decrease it or change some things? And then another question to ask yourself, this certainly isn't the last question. There's probably a list. We could sit here and you could fall asleep, listen to me talk for 5 hours about all the different questions you should ask yourself. But these are the main ones, I think, that help identify and put you on the path to getting to that next step. But how many food items do I really need? Can't tell you how many menus I've seen that are over 25 menu items, and it becomes very muddled. It becomes difficult to execute. It becomes difficult to sell. It becomes difficult to bring in all the items for it. And the 25, for me personally, when I work with clients in the past projects I've done, is a great magical number. It gives you a good group of shareables or appetizers, maybe a soup, a few salads, a couple desserts, and keep it simple. Wouldn't it be better to serve 25 items incredibly well, versus 50 items done halfway because it's just too much. It's too much for the cooks and too much for everybody else. And so it's better for people to come in. And then certainly the 25, you're not stuck with that forever. It's just adapt and update. But I always have a rule of if I bring in 2 SKUs, I have to lose 2 SKUs. So you have so much room on the shelves next to a steam well, and you take nothing out, you're in a bit of a pickle. And so it's important to always be shoveling things in and out. Helps keep things fresh for the guests coming in. Helps you keep things streamlined. And yes, there are going to be the Nancy Smiths of the world that go, where is that dish? And you could say, well, we have something that's even better that we think you're going to like. And I would propose that you would want 25 new Nancy Smiths rather than keep the one. And so I'm not saying you should alienate any guests, saying that there's a way to work with those guests to give them what they need. And maybe they don't even realize it's what they've needed all this time. So those are some key questions that I think would be important to ask yourself as you start on this journey. If you look
John, before you move on,
yep.
We've got a question here. Do you have a sense for, is there a different target number depending on what kind of restaurant? If you're just a breakfast cafe versus a, full service sit down dining,
Sure, that's a great question. So when I say 25, I'm really thinking of a full service, upscale casual type restaurant. I think if you're a food stall in a food hall, that number's closer to 8 to 10. If you are a breakfast place, certainly somewhere in the range of 18 to 22, something like that. I think there's some ways to manipulate it as well. Certainly, speaking of breakfast, I mean, you can have a taco, an omelet, a French toast, and they tend to use a lot of the same, maybe not French toast and omelet, use the same ingredients, but there's a lot of cross-utilization in breakfast. Certainly 25 is just a guideline and guardrails that I try to use with clients, because everybody wants everything. Everybody wants, hey, really need this, and my son loves this, and my mother-in-law loves this, and I had this in San Francisco, and I had this here. I just want to put it all on there. And I think the better thing to do is think, if your aim is 20 to 25, that there is that recurring, like where you can run things on various days of the week. That helps expand your menu a little bit and doesn't force you to do, have too many SKUs. So I think it really is dependent upon the type of restaurant. But if you look around, 25 is a fairly decent number to kind of stay around. So I hope that answers that question.
Yep, thanks.
So this, going back to this, what is the core identity of your restaurant? This right here, just to give an example, I've been part of Front Burner. Like I said, I left a couple years ago to do consulting, but certainly part of the core group there to help create these brands. This is a brand that a lot of people are familiar with, certainly in the Collin County area, with Whiskey Cake. It's a brand that we developed about 9 years ago. I think actually might be like 10 years ago. But one of the things we started with was this core identity. Started with a blank piece of paper, started with an idea of what we thought it would be, and eventually honed it all down to 7 key points. What's important about the key points, and this isn't something that you necessarily have to do you don't have to go through the process of doing something like this, but I think it's important to know that if you're staying true to who you are, then you have an identity. And like I mentioned in the last slide, so what is your identity? So if you are a breakfast place, what is that? What is your story? How did it come about? If you're a gastropub or a bistro, or you're a sports bar, or you're a casual dining restaurant, that's a dangerous term, because what does that mean, right? That's very broad. So who are you going to be, and what's your story going to be? So these are just some examples of what helped our culinary team and myself, along with our development team, stay on course and continue to stay on course. Now, 10 years later, that brand has evolved and opened, I think maybe 10 locations or so. But one of the things, the everyday tavern to eat and drink, it just needed to feel comfortable. It needed to feel welcoming. Farm to fork indicated with food that it was really this real purposeful sensibility towards, we need to get it local, from the local farm, and then it goes onto a plate, obviously, onto glass in the bar. Like, what should the bar have? The bar should have fresh herbs and fresh vegetables, and fruits used in the drinks. The local flavor, again, goes to locality and goes into most of the menu items needed to go through the wood. So you can kind of see how these points work. The point being is if you look here, there's the top left picture, this everyday tavern, what this focus on whiskey. The name is Whiskey Cake. So what should there be? There should be whiskey and there should be cake. So those are 2 pretty easy ones to figure out. If you look at the fish dish below, this plate is from where it's simple, but it does say it's a little bit rustic, a little bit different. One of the key points back here was quirky, weathered, and timeless. There was a point not far after we opened that we said, we should put this whiskey cake dessert on something that's quirky, weathered, and timeless. So to my knowledge, this continues today, is that every so often there will be chefs or kitchen manager or managers or GMs that go to Goodwill or Salvation Army and buy quirky, weathered, and timeless plates. And these are the plateware that are used for whiskey cakes and for brunch. The idea there is to give you a real sense of home, a real sense of something a little bit different, and it differentiates, right? And this is about differentiating yourself from everybody else. Whiskey cake is not that different from everybody else. What sets it apart is that it stays on course. It's whipped cream. That's not odd. Spiced pecans. That's not very odd. Caramel sauce, anglaise, all in most restaurants. But the difference is how it's served, the story behind it, and it's an amazing thing that sort of happened organically and accidentally, honestly, as the cake was created a couple weeks before we were going to open, and then what it should go on came later, how it should be taken out came later. So things evolved as we looked at things through a different lens and didn't get stuck on one thing, but definitely stayed true to who we were. Another example is 60. Houston, downtown Dallas. There's a few at Orlando. Another brand, just to look at. So you have the one here is farm table, wood oven, and open kitchen. So I'll skip to the next slide real quick. So what do we have? We have an open kitchen here. We have a wood oven, and we have farm tables. So you can see that those things were sort of dug into the brand right from the beginning. Cooking with wine, wine country, wine garden. So just some various points there that come to why there's wood pieces. So this farm toast, I don't know that it's on the menu anymore, or it's not the same version, but we had some local woodworker that put this together for us. And one of the things we really wanted to have in there was redwood. That was a big deal to us because that was from California, and the brand was sort of this Napa Valley inspired restaurant in Texas. And so two of the streaks of wood in there are redwood. So it was an interesting, a story again behind it. Is that's what makes the brand different. That's what makes your brand different and unique and something to be proud of. With that being said, one of the things that is incredibly important is to stay narrow. Narrow and deep. So if you think about just a highway, you're staying in your lane. You may get off a little bit. You may have a frontage road. You may have a little bit of a detour once in a while, but ultimately, that you're driving from, Texas to Canada, and you have the road that you're gonna make it on, and you have a map and you have a way to get there, and that you stay narrow. So if your menu needs to stay narrow, that goes into limiting the amount of menu items, having a story behind those menu items, making sure that that is on point. And then the deep part is that you're going far down that road, that you're staying on that path, and you're evolving. So as your menu items evolve and things happen, and things take place and take shape, like COVID, you're learning that you are poised because you are narrow and you know who you are and you know your identity, and that you're following down that path in a very purposeful way. If you try to stay wide and short, that's where you get 50 menu items. You don't have an identity. One of the things to always remember is what's your elevator speech of your menu, or of your restaurant. So somebody says, "What kind of restaurant is that?" Say, "Well, it's a sports bar." What does that mean? What is that? What is your story behind it? So making sure that you can articulate to someone what your brand is. And I'm going to give you an example of that in the next slide of how that went horribly wrong for us a few years ago in front burner restaurants. So one of the things is, with stay narrow and deep with who you are and what you serve. What is the menu items? Who are you? What's your name? What are you about? And your service model. Don't go bouncing around and changing your service model every few weeks. It confuses the servers. It confuses the guests. So how many servers per or how many tables per section? What's your greet? What's your steps of service? What does the hostess say or not say? How do they answer the phone? And then everything you do for the brand or for the business should be narrow and deep. And I may have said this earlier, but you just can't be all things to all people, and you should never try. So that goes into, again, being very purposeful about what menu items are on your menu, why they're on your menu, what do they say about you, what do they say about the guests that you're targeting, and just stay on that. Again, you can't have a bullseye of just, I only want 25 to 35-year-olds to come to my restaurant that are of a particular demographic and make a particular amount of money. That's not staying on deep. That's being ignorant. What you want to say is that I can't be all things. So I can't be, Cheesecake Factory, for example. They have found some way to be, let's say, a very large menu, but they still have a story behind the menu. They still purposely do the things that they do. But they can be a lot of things to a lot of people. That's a bit of an enigma in the industry when we're talking about single units and people who are, single units, being very purposeful about what you're doing. So just keep that in mind. So the next slide is, sort of this art of the pivot. I'm going to give you two examples of sort of these cautionary tales that could have been cautionary, but through some determination and looking at things through a different lens, we were able to come out of it. So the Keeper is a restaurant that was in Plano. When COVID hit, it was decided to close that down. But this is a restaurant that was a very interesting story. We wanted to open a seafood restaurant. We definitely wanted to do something different, do something unique. And when we started with that, we said seafood. Well, seafood is incredibly broad, from what type of seafood, what your price point is, where you want to land. And so we thought by taking it to the Pacific Rim, that would lessen the broadness, if that's a word. But the problem is that we said, hey, we want to do food that represents the Pacific Rim. Well, we counted, I think there was 17 plus countries in the Pacific Rim, from Japan, Vietnam, Thailand, all the way up to the United States and Mexico. So you have Alaska represented there, California, Mexican cuisine represented, Japanese cuisine, and talk about trying to be all things to all people. This was a huge, huge mistake. So as a culinary team, we came up with, maybe it was 25 some odd menu items in a bubble, aside from, the design team. The design team was on a track to create a restaurant that felt a little Northwestern, a little seafood-esque out of Seattle or something. And here we were getting Black plateware and doing Asian items because feeling like Pacific Rim really felt more that side of the Pacific than the United States side of the Pacific. So these are two dishes. It's a crab fried rice with an egg on top, very Asian inspired, a lot of different Asian ingredients, and even in the desserts. This is a lemon curd filled fried wonton dessert. And so what happened was we were having our friends and family. We were ready to go. We felt really proud of the food. We put chopsticks on the table. And people sat down to this seafood experience thinking it was one thing. And by the end of the meal, realizing that what they were eating didn't match the ambiance, didn't match the uniforms, didn't match anything about the restaurant. And it was a real big eye opener for us. And it was, a big mistake. And so we pivoted, within 24 or 48 hours or so, and, ended up with dishes like this. This is like, basically a shrimp boil, simplified, a little bit down the middle with a little bit of a twist, still in that higher end seafood play. But it went from, what is your restaurant? Well, it's the Pacific Rim, and it's describes, imagine yourself, traveling around the Pacific Rim and from the United States all the way over to Asia. And these are items that you would get. It was a very convoluted elevator speech, if you will. Then it turned into just Americana coastal seafood, 3 words. And that defined that brand very, very well. And it was successful for what it was. But at least the food was on point and it was understanding. I Declare, another great example, opened about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. When this brand opened, again, it's too many creative people thinking too complicated, ordinary. The idea there was just to be Southern food with a little bit of a twist. So it's just a little south of the ordinary. But what I Declare became is people said, what is I Declare? And we would say, well, it's this story. And the story is, it's this young debutante from the 20s or 30s who lived in South Carolina, and she got on a boat and traveled around the world by boat and train and horseback and whatever, and ran into different religions and different ways of different cultures and different languages. And through this 10 or 15-year journey, she became a gypsy, and she decided to come back, and utilizing her grandmother's recipes, she created this restaurant in the South with her inspiration from around the world. That is a very, very long and complicated way to describe to somebody what the brand was. And it was a big, big mistake. We got a nice 1-star review from Dallas Morning News. We didn't execute very well. It was confusing for the culinary team what we were going to do. The left is a picture of one of our items. It was, braised rabbit, crispy flatbread with all this is too complicated. This is too hard to do. We changed. The other thing that we did is we took these international sensibilities and we threw some Southern in it, opposed to being Southern with just a touch of this international, inspiration. So, now you have pimento cheeseburger, Nashville hot chicken, there's chicken and waffles. You're very, what you would expect kind of stuff, but done a little bit differently. And it definitely was a huge pivot in the brand. So the reason I bring up these two examples is, are you willing to see things through a different lens? Are you willing to change on a dime? Or are you going to dig your heels in and say, I know this is what people want. I know this is what they need. And so, for I declare, it wasn't what people understood. It wasn't what they needed. And what they needed was some good, wholesome fried chicken, and at the keeper, it just didn't match, and it didn't gel, and people couldn't quite grasp onto it. So another less negative example is Velvet Taco. It's staying the course. Velvet Taco is a brand that opened around 8 or 9 years ago as well, down in Henderson. It was an idea that we would take some fun, international eclectic food items and put them into a taco. And it got a lot of pushback from taco enthusiasts, and people were like, this isn't a taco, and this isn't real, and you can't do this. And I guess there was rules to what you could or couldn't put in a tortilla that some people thought. So, but we stayed the course, and we said, look, we know who we are, and we know who we're identified to. We know who we're targeting. We know what we want to be, and we're going to stay this course, and we're going to dig our heels in, because we know that this is going to work. But we did look at things through a different lens. We looked at things through a different lens. If items weren't selling, we took them off. If things didn't work, we took them off. If the brand has evolved tremendously, where what the tacos are served in, how they're served, how you come up to the counter, how the menu is laid out. So there was a lot of thought that went into, like, basically we know who we are, we're going to be narrow and deep, but we're also successful enough to say we're going to stay on course. So those are just some examples of, things that you can relate to as business owners and restaurateurs, to take a look at. So some more questions. Yourself, examples of what to do, what not to do, some cautionary tales, how to either, look at things through a lens, something a little different. So this is just to ask yourself. So as you start to, this is interesting to you, maybe you're falling asleep, I don't know, because I can't see it. But if you are interested and you are thinking, maybe I do need to look at myself through a different lens. Maybe I do need to do something slightly different. What I would ask you to do is ask yourself, sorry about that. If I'm doing something a particular way, what if I were to change my methodology? I could give you 100 examples of what, doing something. So is that your uniforms, service, food, how you plate something, how you order something, who you order it for, when you're open, what your music is. There's a lot of different things, obviously, that your business 1,000 times better than I would know your business. But what are these things? And this is not a welcome to 2021, change your entire model. This is, what could you do that would be something that you could change, whether it be small or large, and could you do that? And if you did do that thing, if you did change it, you change your methodology, could it be more productive? Could you be more streamlined? And would it result in better quality? So that's what you need. Those are some things you need to ask yourself. And then also ask yourself, how can I streamline my operations to better utilize your key players? I mean, there's some people that have stuck with you since March, have seen you through the toughest times ever, and are still with you as this toughest times aren't over, and they're still with you. And so how do you better utilize that? So it's a really tough challenge to say, I want to bring everybody back. I had 40 employees. I only have 10 now, and I need to bring the other 30 back. But what this COVID has done is brought to light a lot of labor models that maybe aren't exactly where they need to be. Having 50 menu items on your menu requires more people to prep it. Having 25 requires less people to cook it, less people to prep it, less people to execute it and put it away. So how can you streamline things and keep those key players? Certainly we want everybody to get back to work and be employed, and there will be jobs in all facets of this industry. One of the things that you want to look at too is, would it be better? Like, it's better to have 25 menu items done incredibly well than 50 to done not so well. it's better to have 10 employees that make 15 bucks an hour versus 20 employees that make 10, and, how can you spread that wealth? How can you ensure that you're, being part of the solution and getting people put back to work, but then you streamline things and you're holding them accountable and you're getting the best of the best that's out there. So that's going to be a really key thing. And then also ask yourself, what tools do you have access to? What things can you use? If that's some sort of labor tool, if that's an inventorying tool, a scheduling tool, which I guess would be a labor tool, various things that you can have, whatever those are, and you know what those are, there's lots of options out there that would help you, look at things through a different way. So just some key questions to ask yourself. This is just more of a statement, but change and flexibility and differentiation are all paramount to moving ahead of the competition. I don't know what else to say about that. Well, I probably have lots to say about it, but I don't know how else to articulate that other than, change is good. This is an industry that was built on change, that thrives on change. I can't tell you, some of the best nights of service I've had is when printers have gone down, or the hood system goes off, electricity or the gas turns off. Because what that does, those are horrible nights, right, in the midst of it. But what it does is it really helps the cream rise to the top, and you see who are your key players, who are the people that are flexible. When the electricity goes off, does your GM fold into a ball and cry in the corner and walk in, or does he or she, get up and get going and rally the team and rally the troops? So you could certainly, the most recent example is March. What happened in March? What did you do to change? What did you do to, just completely flip your business on its head to stay afloat, stay alive? And now in 2021, what are the differences? What is going to stick and what's not? Are meal kits going to stick? Third-party delivery, I'm sure, is here to stay forever. But how people dine in your restaurant, what your menu looks like, how big your menu is, what your service model is, all that could come back a little bit, or could it be completely changed? And the real success stories will be the people that were able to change and able to be flexible. I feel like they're kind of synonymous with each other, but flexibility, talking about a key thing in the restaurant business, flexibility is it. I think it was orientation somewhere 20 years ago where somebody said, we believe strongly in the F word, and it was flexibility. It's just something that you have to be. And when you are able to change and you are able to be flexible, you will be different and you will be something better than the rest. So differentiation is a huge part of this, because if you want to be better than your competition, that doesn't mean you go next door or down the street or around the corner and say, oh, they're serving this particular burger or this type of chicken or this type of pork, so I'm just going to do that. And that'll make me better because look how busy they are. That's not going to work. What you need to do is think outside the box and say, how can I be different? All these things are paramount. Every single one of them is so important to do. So I just mentioned thinking out of the box. Every decision that you make, whether that be large or small, can make a huge impact. The question is, are you willing to make those decisions? And are you willing to think outside the box? I said stay narrow and deep. So narrow and deep means that you have guardrails and you have a sandbox to play in, and you have certain things that you want to stay within the confines of your brand, your identity, who you are, who you're targeting. When I say think outside the box, that doesn't mean then, now all of a sudden I'm telling you to go beyond that. What I'm saying is within those guardrails, how can you think differently? How can you think, this could be one item, but how can we change it up a little bit just to be a little bit different? I put a picture on here, these sliders at the top. This is a ridiculous item, and from a chef's standpoint. When Whiskey Cake was created, I did the menu development for it. And, we wanted some sliders. At the same time, Burger King had come out with some kind of sliders, and I thought, shoot me now. Like, what are we doing? But, we wanted to stay the course. We felt like it was an approachable item. So we put together some pulled pork, onion strings, coleslaw, barbecue sauce, like not creative at all, I must say. But it was good, and presented it. And someone at the table, someone in our design group said, it'd be funny. What if we put that on a brick? Maybe just have like Three Little Pigs. Maybe that would be kind of a fun way to think about this. So I knew that my neighbor had some bricks in his backyard, so I took it upon myself that night to go grab a couple bricks. Came back in the next day for another tasting as we were developing the menu, and decided to put them on the brick. And somehow that changed from just a boring old slider to something that people resonated with, ordered insanely a lot, and I couldn't believe it. And then through training, and I think through time, to a wood stick holding a house-made pickle for like a wood house, and then this onion strings are kind of the straw house. And so now all of a sudden you take something that is so normal, so down the middle, and you make it something unique and different. So that's thinking outside the box a little bit. Instead of regular potato chips, doing sweet potato chips, that's a little bit outside the box. The one on the bottom is a picture of sweet potato chips with a duck egg on top and goat cheese fondue. This is a sort of a play on, everybody's got nachos, but how do you make them different? So those are some key things to thinking outside the box. The other thing you want to do is what are these changes, these small and impactful changes, these large impactful changes? What kind of cost do they? Oh, sorry. What small things can you do that they don't break the bank? So we're not certainly saying, hey, let's think outside the box and let's spend $10,000 to repaint the restaurant or put up all new signage and things. It's what can you do within the confines of what you're doing, and what are small impactful changes? It could be as simple as some plateware. It could be as simple like how you plate something on a brick. It could be as simple as changing a bread. It could be as simple as changing some items or taking some items off. It could be as simple as changing where the hostess stand is, or what the music is that you're playing, or how the sun shines through a window and how things happen. The whole entire experience could be thought through a different lens. So important to think about those things. The other thing is, sort of as we finish up here, is, how do you stay in the know and how do you stay on trend? Certainly, you can look online, you can hire consultants, you can do different things. There's a lot of stuff you can do in-house. This particular magazine is what I would consider the leading one in the industry. It's a free magazine called Flavor in the Menu. Every 2 months, they come out with a new, what do they call it, edition or something. A new magazine comes out, so 6 times a year, and it's got insights from all different kinds of chefs. I've had the honor of being part of that at times, but insights from different chefs from different parts of the country that are on the sort of the forward end of trends. So something to keep in mind is that, when you identify your identity, sounds kind of strange, but you identify who you are, then you need to identify who do you want to be, who do you want to target. So a lot of clients come to me and say, well, we want to find stuff that's, coming up and coming in the next trend. Well, the problem with that, sometimes people aren't ready for the next trend yet. So trends tend to kind of percolate in New York, Chicago, LA, those kind of areas, very big foodie cities. People that are willing to take some risks. Maybe they lose their lunch doing it, and they lose money, but they somehow, start trends. So it's good to be on trend. You don't really want to be behind the trend, but being ahead of the trend sometimes, depending on who you are and what your identity is, it might be a little too quirky. Some people might be a little bit different. Think about back when kale was just the garnish on a plate at Denny's. Who would have thought today that it's like the hottest thing to put in a salad? Nobody would have thought that. Brussels sprouts, people, I remember as a kid, I wouldn't have been able to, even go close to them. And now they seem to be on every menu. So those are two trendy kind of items. Another thing you want to be careful of on trends is where you fall on that trend line. So like I said, things start in kind of New York and Chicago and LA. Well, if, quinoa, for example, kind of came out of nowhere and ended up on some menus in New York, but as it traveled through this trend journey, it ends up in the grocery store frozen section or at Applebee's. That's when the trend has reached its peak and it's time to find another grain. And if you find something that's too obscure, people aren't familiar with it. So one of the really key things that you want to do when you're trying to stay a little bit ahead of the trends and trying to also create approachable and identifiable menu items is, if you have a burger, people understand meat, they understand bun, they understand cheese. So what can you do just a little bit different on that burger to set it aside? So putting something like gochujang mayo on a burger would be just enough to the side to allow people to say, okay, I'm going to be a little adventurous, but within the confines of my comfortability. That's the word. You know, but if you say, hey, I'm going to do a lamb burger that has kimchi mixed into it, and I'm going to pour gochujang all over it, and I'm going to have crispy wonton strips, and I'm going to have this, and I'm going to have that, and it's going to be on like some kind of like black sesame or black, charcoal bun with sesame seeds. It's too obscure, it's too out there. So try to stay when you're creating menu items, that remember that where trends are going right now in 2021 are for items that are approachable, understandable. They are, craveable and Instagrammable. That's super important as well. But just understand that people have been cooped up in their homes. Certainly, a lot of them are going out. You see them at your restaurants. But generally speaking, certainly, we can all attest that it's not the same. And so when people start venturing out and they start ordering, they want to order something that they understand and they know and they can relate to. They don't want to be overly adventurous, but they want to have some adventure in there. So they want to feel like they can do something that makes them feel like they're a little bit of a foodie, but they're still staying comfortable. Making sure it's Instagrammable. Another thing too is just keep in mind, I mentioned the third-party delivery. Third-party delivery is here to stay. So how are you going to set up your system? How are you going to set up where people pick up things? What companies are you going to use? What are your contracts that you've negotiated with those companies? Does it make sense to do it yourself if you can? A lot of different things. Just keep that in mind. And a big part of it from a chef standpoint is, how's the food boxed? In the past, you had a menu and you created a menu, and unless you were in QSR, fast food, you most likely didn't take a lot of stock into what happened when that food left the building. To-go sales might have been anywhere from 5 to maybe on the high end 10% of your sales, but most probably like 4 or 5%. So it really wasn't a concern. The food left the building, out of sight, out of mind. Somebody gets home, they're kind of like, all right, well, I ordered it to go. What should I expect? This is what I get. It's different now, much, much different. And so people want your restaurant experience. They want the same food. They want it hot. They want it crispy. They want it the same way, maybe not exactly presented the same way, obviously not on a plate, but something that they do want is familiarity to what they used to have. And to be able to deliver them that restaurant experience will be very important. So what kind of boxes you use, thinking outside the box, what kind of to-go materials are you going to use to keep fries crispy and fried food hot and crispy, to keep things cold, to keep various things. If you have a cold item and a hot item on the same plate in the restaurant, how do you work that in a to-go situation? So just being very cognizant of that. Ultimately, what you want, as we said with this, is to be ahead of your competition, to be differentiated from them, internally, to be flexible and to be willing to change. And ultimately, if I can say you get anything out of this, is that you would just simply, learn to look at your business through a completely different lens. That would be the one thing that I would ask you to walk away from this from. And with that, my last slide says questions. I don't think I need to put that up there. So Alex.
Well, John, that was fantastic. We really appreciate it. We've got a couple of questions here that I'll feed to you. But in the meantime, I want to put this slide up to give everybody ways of connecting with us. Let me just share that screen. I'll let you get started on the first question. How do you get your staff to buy into your vision?
That's a great question. So I think that goes back to knowing who you are, being very purposeful about it, and the story behind it. If you're convoluted about your messaging and you're not sure who you are and you bounce around, it's hard to get them to buy in. I think it goes back also to who you hire, how you hire them, who you're getting. But ultimately, if you're changing and you have people on board that like change, then they'll be on board with it. Another kind of more tactical way is that you ask their opinion. So if you're going to look through your business through a different lens, the best people to start with is to ask the people around you. And I mentioned, like, have your friends and family come in, but it's very easy to forget that the people that work around you on a daily basis that are there, trying to make ends meet and trying to make a living, are very integral and important and part of your business. So I would say, go to them one-on-one and say, if you were going to change something, give me 3 things you would change. And then ultimately, by the end of that, you have 15, 20, 30, 40 staff members, and you put together all their input. And then you come back and you say, hey, look, I got all your input. Here's some things we're going to change based on what Mary said, based on what Christine said, based on what, Michael said. And, and here's how we see it. They may say, hey, we should give out free food. Well, I'm not going to take that, example, but certainly you want them to buy in. So I think, but believing in the brand too. I think my experience with Front Burner specifically, and then going back as far as, Pappas restaurants with Papado and those types of restaurants, is you just find people that believe in the brand, because the brand, number one, makes them money as a server or as a cook, and that it is something that they can be proud of. So if you want to say, hey, I think what we should do, looking at this through a new lens, is decrease all the food quality, decrease the prices, serve everything on paper boats, and we'll have a better margin that way. And you guys should just kind of deal with it. That's hard to buy into. But if you say, look, we want to do better. We want you to be able to go home and go to your friends, and somebody says, where do you work? And you say, oh, I work in such and such a place. And their response is, oh my gosh, I love that place. So that's another way to get them to buy into it. Just increase your quality, have them be part of the solution. And, and if they don't buy into it, but you believe in it, that's a whole nother tough question. So.
Okay, great answer. Hopefully I've got up on the screen now. For people who are attending today, if you want to register for additional seminars, we've got a couple of others specifically targeting the restaurant business. There's the website to go to. Hopefully you all have been there before since you registered for this one. But it also lists the other topics so that you can get some information. This video, as well as all of the other ones, are being recorded. They're going to be put on our website or on our YouTube channel, and there's the link to that. Also want to remind everybody to, if they haven't, please go ahead and fill out a CARES application to receive some additional help from us. We're trying to help as many businesses as we can to either get through or recover from the pandemic, and this is one of the ways we're doing that. So if you can go and fill that out, that would be really helpful to us and eventually to you as well. John, I got another question that came in. Your thought on meal kits. You mentioned it once in the presentation. Were they successful? Are they here to stay? And is that something that people should be looking at?
What I've experienced from the outside looking in is that meal kits were an incredible need that was met in the very beginning, in March and April, when people just lost it and said, I can't go to the grocery store. What am I going to do? And these are incredible ways to connect with the guests. What I have noticed and seen in my experience and working sales, I don't have that restaurant experience, but want to kind of get more food, but it doesn't seem to be as big. This serves 2 to 4 people would be a better way to do that.
Okay. Also want to remind everybody who's still with us, it's 10:01. Thank you for staying with us. Everyone's going to get a survey, an evaluation to fill out. It would really help us, and it would help John if you could do that. One final question that we have here, John. Recommendations for operators they can't afford a design and development team. How can we sort of do this on our own?
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, it starts with thinking outside the box. It starts with looking around at what else is out there. So that's as simple as a couple of clicks on the internet. Uh, if you identify who you are, Astro Love that wants to have a bit of a an English feel to it, type that in and start looking around. And then there's lots of inexpensive ways to do that: hammers and nails and pictures and color palettes that you can get at various stores, whether that be at home or at Target or on Wayfair and buy some things. But there's very inexpensive ways to do it, and I think hiring some consultants in some form or fashion may help. But I think doing it in house can be done. It's just a matter of utilizing, again, and you talked about the staff. Maybe there's somebody on staff that's incredibly creative that you didn't know was there that could help. I worked at a restaurant where a server is the one who made all the soap dispensers for the bathrooms because they like doing things with mason jars and they made them. And so that gave them a sense of pride. Then they ended up selling them and gave that server a way to kind of make some extra money. So there are people on your staff that absolutely are willing and able, most likely, to do some of that. Certainly with the food, you want to, again, get some input, look around for different plateware. There's a lot of resources. And like I said, that Flavor in the Menu magazine is one resource. There's multiple. And if you type in free publications for restaurant, for the restaurant industry, there's several that'll come up. And then you'll see different things, a lot of advertisements in there just to get your mind perked up. If you have a broadliner like Cisco, Benny Keefe, PFG, those guys also have connections with different plateware and these kind of things. Maybe not so much the design aspect, but I think that's utilizing some of the people in-house that you have already.
Great, very good, very good. Okay, next question. What do you think of Farmer's Fridge and the business model of vending machines?
I'm not familiar with Farmer's Fridge, but I am familiar with sort of vending machines. I think that there's a thing called Sally the robot, kind of makes your own salad for you. Probably has a good place in an office setting, which those days, some restaurant brands that tried that. Not so much vending machines, but there was a place out of San Francisco. I think it was called Eatsy or something like that. And you ordered at a terminal, and then this little window opened about 5 minutes later, and your food was just sitting in there. You never talked to anybody. There wasn't anybody in the front. There wasn't anybody in the back. That brand folded in on itself, and I think as much as people like Facebook and like the interaction and like Zoom and like all these things and not having to be as social, at the end of the day, they do like to have interaction. So I think the vending machine helps with that sort of sanitary sense of not having to be right up against somebody. But if it's the right kind of food in there, it could work. In the right kind of location, it could work.
Okay. The next question ties right into the salad that you mentioned. It says, for a salad concept, what are the main trends that you advise us to keep in mind?
I think for sure, looking at what there's different kinds of relish, different kinds of sauces, kinds of fruits, pickling those fruits and those items. You don't see that a lot at salad concepts, and that is certainly on trend and will be here to stay. So I think pickled vegetables, pickled fruits are some things, and then also grains and getting some grains that are kind of obscure. Where again, you go into that, there's familiarity with the salad ingredients. There's corn and tomatoes and cucumbers, the normal stuff. But hey, let me put some grains in there and get some grain that has some story about how it, it was farmed in Africa somewhere and, some ancient grains. So those grains and pickled vegetables and fruits are definitely great trend things to look at.
Great. Okay. Well, we appreciate you staying over a few minutes. Great information, and we really appreciate all of the time and effort you put into this presentation. I think everybody got a lot out of it. Like I said, everyone can go view this presentation online and also go sign up for our other webinars at the URLs that are listed on the screen. John, we're getting some very positive feedback in here in the chat. I think people are very appreciative. Thank you to Sam and Ravinder for putting those comments in there, and Jenny. if that's, I think that's all the questions that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation, but we want to thank you again, John, and we will be in touch.
Yeah. Thank you all very much for taking time out today to listen.